Well, Clayton Greene, I am so excited to have you on the Collide Kids podcast today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much, Christen. I'm going to say Christen a couple of times. My wife's name is Christen, so it's just interesting to be
Really?
talking to another Christen. So
That is. She has a beautiful name.
she does. Spells it with a K, but
okay.
I apologize for that discrepancy, but it's a great name.
That's awesome. I love that. Yes. That's what the Christens do. When we meet each other, we ask, how do you spell it?
How do you spell it?
That's
Right,
the
totally.
first question. Yeah.
Yes.
But that's great. Love her name. That's so good. Well, would you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Clayton Greene. I live in Durham, North Carolina with my wife, Christen, my two daughters, Carrot and Susan. And what do I do? My day job is I help support church plants across the country. So there's 70 church plants in something called the Summit Collaborative that I help them thrive and continue to work towards multiplication. And the reason I call it a day job is because my side job is I'm the CEO and co-founder of Goodkind, the maker of Advent blocks or the Gratitude. Because different people have Advent blocks and some people have the Gratitude, and Christen, everybody should have both. So that's my thoughts on that. So that is, not even my part-time job, but something that I do on the side and have fun with. So we already said we live in Durham, which you know this neck of the woods. You said you're from close to here.
Yeah, I grew up in Garner, which is very close to Raleigh, which is close to Durham. So we've driven through Durham a lot and know a lot of the same places that you've been before. So always fun to talk to other North Carolinians. Although we did discuss earlier that this is going to be a stretch for both of us to be talking to one another because you went to UNC and
Tar Heels.
Yes, and I'm not allowed to. I don't know if I'm allowed to associate with Tar Heels because we're a big NC State family. So
yeah, that's okay. And I think we'll, like you said, Jesus says to love your enemies. So here we are putting that on full display.
Well, I love that you have all these things to share with us today. But before we do any of that and get into your job, because this is a show for kids, I always make my guests tell me a joke. So do you have a joke for us today?
Well, I wish that my 10-year-old was here because she's in 5th grade, and apparently they have a class in jokes in 5th grade because she comes home about every day with a new joke or a new riddle. Super into riddles.
Nice.
So I can have a couple of those, but you said joke. So I'm going to tell you the joke that she told me most recently, which I really like because it's a riff on an oldie but goodie.
Okay.
So the question is, do you know why 6 was afraid of 7?
Okay, I think I do, but you tell me.
It's because 7 was hungry.
Oh.
Yeah. Right?
No.
So here's the thing, because 7, 8, 9 is what you think it's going to be.
Yes.
But she said because 7 is hungry. So it even gets more to the core issue of what was happening in 7's life, rather than just telling you what they did. It was more about who 7 is.
I love
more
that.
More like a being than it is a doing. So
That's
6
good.
was terrified.
Yes.
But then 7 ate a Snickers and everything was fine.
And it was all good. All good. Yeah, that's good. Probably from all that leftover Halloween candy.
Yeah. Would that be a great Snickers commercial? Where it's like 7 is like, I'm so hungry. And 8, 9, and 6 are all scared. Then 7 eats a Snickers. I think they should do it. I think it would work, at least on YouTube.
Yeah, I think they should. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your job working with church plants. Can you just explain what that is? What is a church plant?
Yeah.
Is it like a fern or a ivy or something like that?
Yeah, it's ferns, and everybody gets together on the Sunday after Thanksgiving and puts them all up in the sanctuary.
All the ficus.
Yep. Yeah. Every church was a church plant at some point. Every church has a founding kind of time or opportunity, and all the way back from when we read about churches being formed in the New Testament. So as Paul's moving to different cities, he's starting new churches. Church planting is what we say now, or in my line of work. And I like the idea of planting because it's something that has to grow. We're not just out here starting a business, right? But we're planting something that is an organism, right? The church itself, the people are going to be growing, and it turns into something that only God knows what it can be, but also that God has a vested interest in, and he says that the gates of hell cannot prevail against it. So we continue to go to different places and different cities that God has called pastors to go and start a new congregation. And in many cases, these new congregations are actually partnering with existing congregations to bring new life to existing congregations that for whatever reason God is telling in the story of that congregation, there is a renewal that is needed. So it's really, really fun to see a renewal of churches and actually some new churches in areas where there are not churches to be started as cities are growing and people are moving, and we want to continue to see God's mission going forward.
Yeah. And I love that perspective too, that every church started as a church plant. So every church, so even if you go to a large church that's been around for 100 years, at some point they had to get started.
At some point was like, we should have a church right here. Who's going to be the pastor? It's like, everything started that way.
So you also said you have a hobby where you have Advent blocks, and that's actually how I got to meet you, was learning about your Advent blocks. Would you share a little bit about that and what that's all about?
So Advent blocks, gosh, the story goes back. I was recounting today 7 years ago when my daughter Kara was 5. She said to me and my wife, Christen, spelled with a K, Mommy and Daddy, you say that Christmas is all about Jesus, but it feels like Christmas is all about presents. Now, kids listening to this in the car right now, that does not give you permission to say that to your parents because it hurt my feelings, okay? We're all doing our best as parents, and I was doing my best. And in that moment, what we were doing day to day was not lining up exactly with what we were saying we were going to do. Fast forward to the next year, tried to find a resource that would actually help bring to the center of a home a rivaling anticipation, because we weren't going to stop presents, but something that would actually build anticipation to Christmas about Jesus's birth as much as it was about cookies and lights and music and presents. So I couldn't find anything. I ended up drawing how some pieces of wood could move in our living room that would kind of be a decoration, but kind of would be like an Advent type of practice. I asked my friend Chris to write a book. It ended up being a 25-day guide. We did it that next year. That was 2019. It was just 5 families that did it. And then the following year, we wanted to expand it to a few more people, and a couple of thousand joined us. And then from then, it's just continued to be a resource that we are trying to get out to families as much as possible every year, because we say it's a Christmas practice that helps kids and parents focus on Jesus and not just the presents. And it's pretty wild how helpful it has been to our family, and we've heard stories of so many others as well.
Yeah. Would you just explain a little bit about what Advent is? Because I know I grew up in a church. We didn't talk about Advent, but I knew of people that did talk about it, and I saw the word. And, whenever you go to the store and see the big Advent calendars full of chocolates and treats and stuff, you're like, oh, I want to be a part of that. But I didn't know what it was until I was an adult. So let's help some kids out learn a little bit about that now. Can you explain what Advent really is?
So Advent calendar, chocolates or little presents or whatever, super fun, building up anticipation. You take the entire month and it kind of creates a lot of fun related to it. We usually do a chocolate calendar in addition to our Advent blocks. Advent as a Christian Christmas practice, it's all about anticipation. It's a time in the year where the church takes time to reflect and anticipate about God coming to earth in Christ in the incarnation. And so rather than just celebrating that on one day, you take a period of time and you think about it, you anticipate it, you read about it, you study it, and it leads up to a celebration that we call Christmas. In a lot of churches, not all, but in a lot of churches, there'll be like a wreath and 5 candles. There's a Christ candle, there's a hope candle, there's a faith candle. There's a lot of different colors and things that traditionalists will do. But the whole point is setting yourself up to anticipate and then celebrate the fact that God came to earth in Christ. And so the traditions of the church doing it for 25 days or doing it for 4 Sundays, really, it dates a long, long time ago in church history. And it's just something that we continue to do today. Sometimes with your family, sometimes with your church.
So you said you have blocks. How does that work? How do the Advent blocks work with your celebration of Advent?
All right. So Advent blocks, it's 25 days. It starts on December 1st. The way the blocks work is there's 27 blocks in the kit, and you line them up 1 to 25. And there's a star block that goes on top of the 1 and a world block that goes on the top of the 25. And then every day you do a reading and you turn the block from the 1 to an image, and then the 2 to an image, and the 3 to an image. And the image corresponds to the story that you read for that day. The stories from December 1st to the 25th go all the way through the Bible, from Adam and Eve all the way up to Jesus' birth.
Oh, wow.
And that star moves on top of the day that you're reading. So the star represents God coming to earth over at the other end. That's the basic way to explain it, but the writing is absolutely beautiful. It'll make you laugh. It always, at least one time in the 25 days, makes me cry. But the thing that ends up being really great about it is because it's beautiful enough to be a decoration, but also is playful enough that anybody, whatever age the kid is, they can actually hold it, play with it, engage with the story. And so it really brings the whole family together.
Yeah. So if you have middle school boys living at your home or toddlers, they can all enjoy and not destroy this.
Yeah.
this decoration. That's good.
Exactly. I don't recommend that you throw the blocks, middle school boys. They're wooden, call. They're sturdy. Like, you just hold those. But I do, yes. And what we have been really surprised about is, as long as you have somebody in the sweet spot range of 3 to 13, everybody doesn't have to be. As long as you have somebody in that range and you're reading to that person, by the end, almost everybody is participating in it.
What is it about holidays that you think is so important? Because I love that we're always talking about Christmas. We just had Thanksgiving. So now we're in this Advent season, holiday traditions. Is that something that's important to you and your family?
I love holidays because it helps us understand when we are in the year. I've gotten more into all the holidays in the last 5 years than I was before Advent blocks. And it's because our world these days, as opposed to when you were in Garner, every month or every day can tend to feel the same way. When we were growing up, like, you couldn't get raspberries in the grocery store year round, but now you can.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just like, there's kind of that flattening that I don't know is necessarily good.
Yeah.
You know, it's good for harvest time to be harvest time. And it also, to be fair, is good that we have access to food in the grocery store all year round. But I mean, that the rhythms of a year. So I really am into what Memorial Day does to the rhythms of the year, which I can never remember. That's the one that kicks off the summer, right?
Right.
Like, what does that feel like to be like, summer's here and let's enjoy summer for what it is? So that's one. The second thing is, in terms of faith, is holidays, Christmas and Easter being the most notable ones, but holidays in general provide memorable opportunities. Like, we are very literally creating memories regardless of what we are doing.
Yeah.
You will remember the things that you do as traditions year over year over year. And so, as a parent, if I can put our faith into those memories, then the likelihood that that faith then goes with my children over the long term greatly increases.
Yeah, I think that's so true, because I don't know, like, I think there's some families that are a little bit scared of instilling faith traditions, or just faith in general, in their children. Like, they don't want to force them into their salvation experience or force them into having a faith of their own. But as parents, I think we also need to be the ones guiding them through it. And I think when we can do that, like you said, infusing our memories with things that are built on our faith, I think that's a great way to do it without being forceful about it.
Yeah. And what you said is completely fair and a worthwhile thing to think about. But my challenge in that situation would be, think about how, like, we don't force Target on our kids, but they certainly know how to do it.
Right.
So we don't ever actually teach or force our kids to go into a store and to use a credit card in order to buy something from Target. But you better believe they will do it in their life, because they saw us do it and they did it with us over and over and over again. So we have to live and repeat and pass on our faith in a way of they're doing it with us over and over and over again. And those are actually the things, train up a child in the way he should go and he will not depart from it, is training, not necessarily teaching. Now, teaching is a component of that, but living those things over and over and over again doesn't force their faith. There's still a decision to be made.
Right.
But it definitely does put something hardwired into how they view the world and the things they know how to do that has the greater ability to carry on with them outside of the home.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. And like you said, it's really about what they see us doing. So it's not always that we can't, like that we have to have it all together. They can see us mess up and they can see us do it well. But we're showing them that this is something important to us. And that's really good. Now, one thing that I think is important is starting these traditions when kids are young. But what if there's a family listening and their kids are like mine, they're in middle school and they never did Advent blocks or anything like that? Is it too late to start a tradition like that now?
Great question. I would say absolutely not. It's not too late in order to start a new tradition. But also, and I might be undercutting the number of people that are going to get Advent blocks, but if you are already doing something that has an element of your faith and it already is a tradition, I would say lean into that and build on it
Mm.
rather than trying to recreate the wheel. Because like I said about memories before, if there are things that you are already doing that have elements of your faith in it, and it's meaningful and it's memorable and it's a tradition, then I think you try to improve and build on that rather than starting something new. If you haven't done anything, there's a ton of grace for that as well. So yeah,
Right.
just start something now. This year is better than next, and next year is better than the one after that. So I mean, I think you definitely have the permission to be able to do that, but also make sure you celebrate the wins and the things that you've done up to this point. A candlelight service at grandma's church might not give you everything that you want. It might give you everything you want, but it also is a tradition that can be built on and added to.
I love that. Yeah, because parents are like, I don't need one more thing.
Totally. That's fair.
But I think this is a great thing. And I love that you guys have created something that's beautiful. It could be a decoration, but it's also something that the whole family can get involved with. So that's really good. Would you just talk a little bit about your podcast? Because you guys have a podcast. Is it all about blocks? Is that what your podcast is?
Yeah, we're talking about small blocks and big blocks and plastic blocks and wooden blocks. So really Advent blocks kind of kicked the whole thing off, right? So there were some things we learned about Advent blocks that were really successful, that allowed families to be consistent, that we became very interested in terms of how to make a spiritual habit stick, right? So if we're all trying to build spiritual habits in the home, there are some things that we can learn from habit scientists as well as from the Bible that help us be more consistent in those things. Mm-hmm. And so that's really the rubric or the structure that we have given as we have continued to create other products. And that's what we do on the podcast as well, is we take these principles, we take spiritual habits, we take the calendar, and we're essentially diving into how does the calendar impact my life and the rhythms of my family? What spiritual practices are out there that I could do, and how might I actually put them into practice with my family? And then how could I be more consistent with it? And those are all things that we have learned from Advent blocks, really, and the other things that have come out of that. I typically am more of like the host. I have not been to seminary, though I do help church plants. I have two people that are most consistently on the show. Chris and Amy both did go to seminary, so I'm just sitting there asking them questions, trying to understand the spiritual practice for myself. Mm-hmm. And then our designer and our videographer are also on our Habits and Holidays episodes, where we dive deep into every individual month of the year and kind of call it what it is and try to pay attention to what God's doing throughout the different seasons.
That's really cool. And I love that's such a great resource for families, because if you don't know where to start, or you need some ideas, or you just want to hear some good information about that, they can go check out your show. What's it called?
The Goodkind podcast.
Goodkind podcast. Okay, we'll put a link in that in the show notes so people can check that out for sure. And then you guys also said you had a book coming out very soon. Can you tell us about your book coming out in January?
Yeah, so it's Building Spiritual Habits in the Home, and that's the title, and that's what it's all about. And it is, I don't know if you've read James Clear, Atomic Habits.
Mm-hmm. Great book.
We say that the book is Atomic Habits meets Jesus.
Okay.
So there are
Love
things
that.
like making it easy, where James Clear says, rather than challenging yourself to exercise for 30 minutes a day, challenge yourself to drive to the gym, like make it as easy as possible. Mm-hmm. There's things in there about how tangible resources can actually cue you to doing things that you often would forget to do. There's things about time and place, and how what time of day you are trying to do a habit can greatly impact the success of you being able to do that habit. How place can greatly affect how you're thinking about something. And so essentially just walk through 6 different things that can help you with what you're already doing be a little bit more consistent, or to start new things that you have been wanting to do, but you haven't quite been able to do yet.
Okay, that sounds awesome. I love that. And I love that book. That habit that kicked my butt when I read that. I was like, wow, I got to get started on some good habits.
The way it happened is, I mean, Advent blocks is kind of a little bit built around that as well, in terms of how, like, why it actually works and why you stay consistent. But every time everyone ever read any of those books, I mean, there's tons of them. There's a book called Hooked. There's a book called The Power of Habit. There's, of course, Atomic Habits. There's a lot of different books that I've read in the space. And every time I read it, I'm applying it to my faith and my spiritual habits. And then now we just kind of wrote it down and directly applied it that way.
That's great. I love that. Clayton, this has been so good. I've loved talking with you today and learning about Advent and your Advent blocks. I think that's going to be a great resource for families to get a hold of. How can they find out more about Advent blocks and order themselves a set?
Yeah, so you could Google Advent blocks. That's one option.
Okay.
Another option is you can just go straight to our website, which is goodkind.shop.
Okay. And what does the name Goodkind mean? What does that mean?
We try to help people practice the good kind of habits and holiday practices.
Oh, I love that. That's really good. Well, this has been so cool, Clayton. Thank you so much for being on the show. Before I let you go, I always ask my guests to tell me a memory from when they were a kid. So what memory do you want to share with us today?
It kind of goes along with the consistent traditions that you do are the things that you're going to remember. I remember post-Christmas, every year, my family would go to this thing called the Beach Ball Classic. And it itself rivaled Christmas for me, where my family would go down. My dad would take a couple of days off of work. My mom was a teacher and then was at home for a period of time. So we would all go down together. Me, my mom, my dad, my brother. Sometimes our neighbor would go, and we would just go watch high school basketball for like 2 or 3 days in a row. We would just go do it all day. We would eat. We would watch basketball, and it just was this time of non-rushed time with my family in person, where we just were together for long periods of time. And I don't know why, but that is one of my favorite memories from growing up. So anything like that the families that are listening are doing, I think those things end up kind of really putting a closeness in the hearts of our kids of being with us and doing it consistently.
I love that. That sounds so fun too, just to watch sports all day long.
Yeah. And in person, I think that was a big thing about it as well. Because it was a different space. Like I remember like being there. It was great.
That's very cool. Well, Clayton, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was great meeting you.
It was nice to meet you as well. Thanks for having me.
I have a riddle for you. See if you can get it. Okay. What has enters but no exits? Keys but no locks? Spaces but no room?
I don't know what.
A keyboard! Did you get it?